You said the other day that you regret voting for Donald Trump. You stick by that? Do you regret it? You went as far as saying impeach. Do you still believe that today? And why?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk are all out there right now saying you will destroy your coalition if you do this. You will absolutely split MAGA into a civil war against each other.
You know, you said you're a radical libertarian, don't like the militarization, worried about the tyranny of government, etc. So are you opposed to the Marines in LA?
Well,
joining me now, Dave Smith. He's one of the leading libertarians in the country. His show is called Part of the Problem. And he has just said that he is upset that he voted for Donald Trump. So we're gonna talk to him about it, and we're gonna see if we could find a mutual answer for the problem of going to war in Iran, which neither one of us wanna do. Dave, welcome back.
Thank you, Cenk. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So first, let's talk about whether we should talk. Then we'll talk about what we talked about in the past. And then we'll finally get to how do we end this war, okay? How do we stop this war? So first, we asked our audience, should we form a coalition with the right against the war with Iran? Because a lot of people on the left say, no, the right is verboten. Don't ever talk to them, don't have a beer with them, don't do anything with them. For Young Turks members are totally different. 97% said yes, okay? So that's a pretty good number. So Dave, first, I did a debate with you about Israel. You and I were on the same side. It was against Dennis Prager and Batya Ungar-Sargon, right? And let's be honest, we annihilated them, right? Okay, and at that time, you were pretty set against Trump. What made you vote for Trump in the first place?
Well, there were several factors. I thought, first of all, I should probably make clear that, and this is something that's come up because I've seen the reaction to me saying I regret voting for the guy. I'm a radical libertarian, and I look at voting in a different way than I think a lot of other people do. I don't look at voting as like a full endorsement of somebody in every position that they have. Libertarians, and I believe we're right about this, we view governments inherently as instruments of tyranny and force. And that doesn't, by the way, I'm not even saying some libertarians might argue, and I would probably agree, that there might be some legitimate functions that could be done by an instrument of tyranny and force. But nonetheless, that is what they are by their very nature. And I think that the people essentially are under duress by their government. And voting to me is a strategic, option. You could, as Walter Block, who's a libertarian economist, he used the example of if you were in a concentration camp and they gave you a vote over who your guard is gonna be. Now that doesn't mean that you endorse being in a concentration camp or you endorse everything that this guard is gonna do. You're simply saying, I think this guard is gonna be a little bit more just than that guard is. Now, I supported Donald Trump for several reasons. Number one, I thought that it was very important for the country that the Democrats take a loss. This was, I was very clear on this from the very beginning that I thought this was the most important issue. There was just, the Democrats to me had just gone so far on so many issues, whether it was, even though Republicans were bad, Democrats were leading the charge on championing lockdowns and vaccine mandates and just the insane COVID hysteria, the insane woke hysteria, which I think was like a neoliberal takeover of the left, and the Democrats were leading the push for that. Then on top of that, there was the war in Ukraine that they went all in on, while the Republicans were at least rhetorically substantially better than them on. Then they had a senile president who they lied to the American people and told wasn't senile. Then they tried to, after denying a primary, after rigging the previous two primaries, they then wouldn't even let you vote on the next substitute candidate. All this stuff, Cenk. So I just thought this was so overwhelming. They needed to lose. I thought it was an incredible blow to the corporate media. I think one that they'll never recover from was Donald Trump winning a second time and kind of the podcast scene ushering him in. So I thought there were lots of cultural issues and bigger issues for the country. I felt like Donald Trump winning would be better than Kamala Harris winning. And then on top of that, I guess I reserved preserved a little bit of hope that, hey, things looked a little bit different this time. He had Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy and a lot of these different figures. Tucker Carlson had some influence on him, who's really great on a lot of the foreign policy issues. And Joe Rogan helped get him into the White House. Maybe he could have some influence. It seemed to me that there were more possibilities with Donald Trump for something positive happen. And I would also add, he had been burned by the system in a unique way. And I thought maybe he would be a little bit different this time around. And also he had been totally betrayed by Netanyahu when Netanyahu came out and congratulated Joe Biden for winning the election before our media was even calling the election for Joe Biden. So anyway, I thought maybe there's a shot he'd be a little bit better. And I thought, with all the factors, I put in on, I'm going to support this guy.
Yeah, so look, there's plenty that I disagree with you on that analysis, and there's plenty I agree with you on that analysis. The Democrats did lie to the country. Joe Biden was too old, and it was absurd. Corporate media did lie, and corporate media, I love that they were defeated. That's why that tweet that people found to be controversial, I was not 1% happy that Donald Trump won. But I said after that he won, we were out of the establishment prison and in the populous woods. And I prefer to be in the populous woods than in the establishment prison. And that prison was set by corporate media, mainstream media, et cetera. And so now there's a jailbreak. And that's why we're in the conversation we are about Iran. They say, of course you have to go to war with Iran. Who do you think you are? You know, if Israel commands us to go, you must go, right? But now independent media is saying no, and that's what we're united about. That's what we're gonna get to in a second. But you did mention one thing there that drew my interest. Super quick, because I really want to talk about the war. But you said you're a radical libertarian, don't like the militarization, and worried about the tyranny of government, et cetera. So are you opposed to the Marines in LA?
Well, I mean, no. I think that's a little bit different of a question. And
really?
I don't, generally speaking, I don't like the government doing anything. And I don't like our government being so militarized. I've been an opponent of the militarization of the police for many years at this point. I do think that there is, and look, this could be a whole topic that we talk quite a lot about, but the riots of 2020 and things like that, I simply do not believe should be allowed to happen. And I also don't think that they're very organic in nature. I think there's big business behind a lot of these things and big money behind a lot of these events. And listen, when protests turn violent, I think that that does need to be stopped, and whatever that takes. I'd prefer it doesn't take the military to do that, but I am not for violence in the street. I'm not for destroying people's property. I thought it was an absolute outrage in 2020 that we're society, we have this militarized police and all of this stuff, and the one time that there might be a legitimate need for it, they just stand down and allow dozens of people to be murdered and thousands to be assaulted and billions of dollars in property damage. I think it's appalling. I also think it's appalling when cops are spraying pepper spray into nonviolent protests and things like that. But I don't have much tolerance for riots.
Okay, good. So neither do I. I believe in nonviolence. We're going to talk about that in the context of the war protests in a minute. But good, because otherwise we've established that we really do disagree on other issues, right? I think the Marines in LA is an abomination, and I think you're totally wrong about that, especially as a libertarian. I think that as you saw the 22 corporations that sponsor the military parade, our military has gotten corporatized, and so if you're worried about,
I'm against the parade.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the US military in the streets is exactly the tyranny of government that you guys were worried about. But okay, so we disagree on things. Good. Okay, now let's talk about things we agree on, right? It's called being an American. Sure. And I want everybody to know, and these days, especially on the left, I love you guys, okay? But Americans are allowed to disagree on different things and agree on others. I know it's a revolutionary thought, but we're doing a revolution here. Okay, so you and I both agree we should not go into Iran. But now, because of Donald Trump's actions, you have now flipped on Donald Trump. So you said the other day that you regret voting for Donald Trump. Do you stick by that? Do you regret it? And you said as far as You went as far as saying impeached. You still believe that today, and why?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I at this point, look, Cenk, with a lot of these things, what do I have? I don't have any power over actual government policy, but I have a little bit of an audience, and then I have an influence on some people who have audiences, and so I can have a little bit of influence on a broader conversation. And what else can you do when the president of the United States is leading us into the most disastrous policy imaginable, and I'm on record having supported the guy? What can I say other than, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, and this is terrible, and let me try in my little part to rally as many people that I can to give pushback to this, and not due to my influence, but just in a very good turn of events, and because some people have shown real integrity, and also because I think there's a certain desire amongst the people. But we've seen a lot of very influential MAGA figures really say that they will not put up with this and they will not support this. And I think that's something that should be celebrated by everybody who is against the absolute catastrophe that a further escalating war in Iran would be. And look, it's not as if Donald Trump doesn't have to run for re-election. He does have midterms coming up, and he does need his coalition to some degree in order to get his agenda through. But the only thing that many of us can do at this point is try our best to create a situation where there will be a cost to be paid for him doing this. And so I think that it's been pretty clear. I mean, look, it's pretty remarkable. Forget me, but like figures like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk are all out there right now saying, you will destroy your coalition if you do this. You will absolutely split MAGA into a civil war against each other. And so that is, if you think about it in the game of politics, a huge cost to be imposed on somebody. And so right in this very prescient moment, the fact that that cost is being imposed, I think is a great thing. And if I can play any part in that, then I'm happy to do it. And also, Cenk, as something that I think me and you kind of have in common, I don't know, man, when I get on these shows and I start talking, I'm just gonna say what I think is true, And so, I didn't even like really plan out that I was gonna say on Breaking Points the other day, like, I regret supporting him and he should be impeached or whatever. It was just like, I kind of knew it might happen because that's how I felt. But then I just started talking to Sager and Crystal, and that's how I feel. And why should he be impeached and removed? Come on, it's so obvious. He's like essentially saying, and I don't know what the real story is here because there's conflicting reports, but it doesn't matter because he's saying it either way, that he was negotiating with Iran to sucker them, to distract them so Israel could launch a sneak Pearl Harbor attack, a completely illegal, aggressive attack against a sovereign nation. Come on. Now you're gonna impeach somebody over a phone call with Zelensky where he maybe, tried to suggest that there should be a quid pro quo, which he never even got, and then caved, never even got the investigation on Biden and still sent the weapons package in anyway. That's impeachable. January 6th is impeachable, but leading us into the 7th absolutely disastrous regime change war of choice on behalf of a foreign nation. I don't know. Cenk, I've heard it said before, remember who coined the phrase, but an impeachable offense is anything the Congress decides. Well, okay. Well, if our Congress wasn't a bunch of, hack, corrupt, blood-soaked monsters, this seems like maybe something they should pick. Maybe this should be the thing that you impeach a president over. Yeah, worse than having an affair and lying about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, unquestionable about that. So let's see if we can unite the country against this war. So we're starting with progressives and libertarians here, right? So Dave, I came up with an idea. I'm gonna run it by you. You're the first person I'm running it by. Let's see if we can get agreement on it and see what we can do going forward, right? The idea is called Operation Consequences. And so the first step was going to be having us pick champions for our side and have them introduce the War Power Resolution Act, right? And good news, since they're our champions, they already did it without us asking, okay? Yes. So my guess is you would have picked Thomas Massie. I would have picked Bernie Sanders, and Thomas Massie and Bernie Sanders have introduced legislation to bring the power of war back to Congress, which is where the Constitution has it, right? So let's get back to our constitutional system. Let's get back to war. So step one's already done because that's what champions are made of, right? So, okay, step two is a pledge that if anybody votes yes on this resolution, that we never vote for them again, ever, 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 okay? You can tell me you're great on every other issue, and I could really like you, but you vote yes on this war, and we're done with you forever. What do you think?
100%, yes.
Okay, so we set up a site, it's like, it just directs back to a pledge. We're gonna do more and more as we go along, but the pledge is to never vote for anyone who voted yes on this war. And it's called unitedagainstwar.com, and we'll have the link down below, unitedagainstwar.com, okay? So now, here's the reason to do a pledge. If it turns out, Dave, that it's just me and you, and we ask, our audience, you ask your audience, I'm part of the problem. We both talk about it in all the shows we go on, but we just can't get to like 1 million people that sign the pledge. People aren't gonna take it seriously. 12,000 people, that's nice, but it's not gonna work, right? And maybe, Dave, what we wind up doing is, Al Capone's vault here. Like, you remember Geraldo made a big deal about it, hyped it up, and then it turns out there wasn't anything in it, right? But if you get to 1 million or 2 million voters who say they will never vote for someone who votes for this war, or you get to 5 million, now all of a sudden a little bit of concern starts to creep in. And mainstream media starts to go, who are these rabble rousers? And how dare they be against this war? So now I'm gonna get to the next steps in a second, but a mass of people promising like a new voting bloc, totally divorced from the parties. And this is really important. Dave, what I'm saying is do it in your primaries. So nobody's doing unilateral surrender to the other side, right? So if a Democrat votes for this war, you must go vote in a primary against them, right? And if a Republican votes for this war, same thing, go in a Republican primary and vote against them. Does that part make sense?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so now, the most important part is the actual accountability, right? And that has 2 phases. So first part of the accountability is, I hope we get volunteers. We do Operation Hope, tyt.com/hope, but you can volunteer in any way, shape, or form. You don't have to volunteer, you can just do it on your own, right? Find your local congressman, find your senator, and just ask them, right? You'd be shocked at how easy it is. Just Google it, find out who they are, email or phone, and ask them, are you in favor of the War Powers Resolution? And Dave, what's great about this resolution is the president can't veto it. It's a congressional power in the Constitution, right? And they must vote on it in 15 days. So it sits in committee usually for 15 days, and it's a privileged bill. So it's gonna get a vote, and everyone's gonna go on the record. That is why pressuring people to, and basically what you're doing, Dave, is a public service announcement to your members of Congress, to your representatives. Hey guys, just know that if you vote yes, we're gonna vote against you the rest of our lives. I'm just letting you know, you can do whatever you want with that information. I know you're gonna get a check. I know you're gonna get a check from AIPAC to vote yes, right? But it's gonna cost you this number of votes. Again, does that seem logical to you?
Yeah, of course. All of this is the most obvious and logical stuff. I'm thrilled that you're putting it together like this.
All right, unitedagainstwar.com. So finally, the last part is the part where, and I'm asking you like genuinely, what do we think? Is it gonna happen? Are people gonna rise up? Or are they gonna go back to tribalism and they're just gonna go, well, no, I mean, I don't wanna say no because because of Trump and because my party, and but the Democrats leadership says we should vote yes, blah, blah, blah. Or are there gonna be real consequences? Are the American people gonna rise up enough that we cost them a bunch of seats? And totally not related to anything partisan. No, this is just a voting bloc on a single issue. It's direct democracy. You vote this way and you're done. What do you think? Does it have a prayer of working?
All right, so this is interesting, and I always want to be a little bit humble when I'm predicting what's going to happen next, because predicting the future is always a tough business. And there's sometimes things will be so obvious that you could predict, like it's like, hey, if you shut down the economy and print $6 trillion, that's going to have some negative impacts on the economy. Like, okay, there's some things you can predict, but there's some things that are tougher, and there's a lot going on here, and we don't know everything. I'll say this, there is the hawks right now are celebrating the success of this, this war 5 days into it. That's always the case. They always celebrate it right away. They always, every single war of my lifetime, they're bragging about it as soon as it starts. It's not till it goes bad that they start admitting the truth, if they ever do. Maybe there is some chance. I've heard it argued that Iran is a better candidate for regime change than Iraq or Libya or Syria or Yemen or any of these other regime change arenas, or Afghanistan that we've seen in the last 25 years. Maybe there is some sliver of a chance that the regime gets overthrown and it's not the catastrophe that it was in all of these other areas. I find this to be very hard to believe, but just with the caveat that maybe there's some chance that it goes that way. It seems much, much, much more likely that it's going to be exactly what the other 6 countries in Wesley Clark's 7 countries in 5 years turned out being, and this will be the 7th catastrophe. I think at this point, they're in a regime change war. And I don't know. I think it's worth trying to stop it. It's worth trying to impose as big a cost on the politicians in charge if they actually do go through with this. But it seems like they've already launched a regime change war. As me and you both know, Cenk, this was never about a nuclear threat from Iran. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Iran is not trying to get nuclear weapons. Iran has a latent deterrent. Essentially, they want to just let you know that they could enrich up to a high enough level to have nuclear weapons, so you don't do what's already happened to them. Everybody involved knows that, including Netanyahu, who's lying through his teeth about that. He doesn't really think Iran's been 3 years away from a bomb for 30 years. You know what I mean? Like, he knows. And so they're in a regime change war. This has been their goal the whole time. Donald Trump has signed off on it. He's backing it up. The question now is, if that is the case and they go through with it, okay, there's a couple major questions. Number one is, what can Iran actually get off? And I don't know that that's completely clear. I know that back in 2007, 2008, even the Pentagon was saying we can't go to war with Iran because they can touch all of our bases and all of our embassies. They can touch Israel. They can really inflict real damage. This isn't like the other puny countries we were picking on in the terror wars. Maybe things have changed a little bit since then. Maybe the technology, and that certainly Israel's drone strike there was something they couldn't have pulled off years ago. But I think the real question, to get at the heart of what you're talking about here, is 9/11 happened in September of 2001. We invaded Iraq in 2003. They spent all of 2002 laying out this propaganda, this cover that was somewhat believable in the wake of 9/11. It was like, hey, 9/11 just happened. There's this rogue Arab regime that was in on 9/11 and is friends with the terrorists, and he's developing nuclear weapons or has nuclear weapons, and he's going to hand them off to the terrorists, and then they're going to nuke. Al Qaeda is going to nuke Kansas because Saddam Hussein gave them the. Okay, now look, obviously it was all, and obviously it was not. None of it was true, and. These were not Saddam Hussein's friends, and he didn't have the weapons, but at least there was a cover story there. Here, there is no cover story. This is just clearly Israel's war. And also, they don't have control of the media in the way they used to. They don't have control of the narrative. And so with guys like me and you and hundreds more like us, who are all gonna be telling the truth about this to pretty big audiences, I don't see how all of that works. And if we really are entering this phase, we're entering a new phase in America. As much as we were in March of 2020, maybe even more so, this dynamic cannot stand. They can't have all of us telling the truth while they haven't even laid out a propaganda campaign if they're launching another regime change war. It just simply can't work. I don't know if they're gonna try to silence us, if they're really gonna weaponize the law against us, or if they're just gonna fail at their mission, or there'll be a revolt. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm telling you, with all these facts on the ground, this doesn't work. And so we will see. We're in a whole new time right now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe cooler heads will prevail here. Maybe they will go back to the negotiating table. But I gotta tell you, Cenk, I don't think so. I mean, every signal is that this regime change is going through. And so, again, I support doing everything we can to stop it, but I don't know what happens in the next chapter of this.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be interesting.
So let's talk about the upsides that you mentioned and the downsides. So is it true that it's a regime change war? Absolutely. And notice how quickly they move the goalposts, right? Because they started with, weapons of mass destruction. They're about to have nukes. Then instantly, Netanyahu goes on Fox News, Brett Baer asked him about it. Oh yeah, they weren't gonna get it for a whole year anyway. Okay, and I'm gonna play you a Netanyahu clip if you haven't seen it yet. Daily Show put it together, I love it. So to show you what a giant liar he is. But I don't want people to lose focus. I think what Dave is saying about independent media, well, we're gonna test it. This is the beginning. This is the very first day of us testing the power of independent media. Okay, so I want to come back and talk about that in a second, but I want to bring up that Netanyahu clip because in case you didn't see it on the Young Turks show today, we're normally live 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, then we do interviews like this with David, 8 o'clock and other folks, right? And so we played it for you guys, but I want to play it here because if you're new to this, understand how much, let's be honest, the government of Israel overall, and specifically Benjamin Netanyahu, has been lying to Americans for the last 33 years. Watch.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the rich uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
Okay. So I'm gonna get back to how we're gonna fix this, but in the 2006 clip, he said that they could produce 250 nuclear warheads in a decade. It's been basically 2 decades since then. So do they have 500 nuclear warheads? And Dave, the question I wanna ask you, I know, look, this is a layup, but really, if you're like, I've lost every ounce of respect for mainstream media. How do you look at a clip like that and then quote Netanyahu as if he might be telling the truth the very next day, in your broadcast? So what are they supposed to, like me? I would say Netanyahu is a giant liar, and no one should ever trust a word that comes out of his mouth. But mainstream media reporters will say, nope. Not only beloved Israel, and you have to believe him more than the terrorist Muslims, right? But at a bare minimum, they'll say 50-50. But Dave, it's not 50-50, is it? He's been trying to drag us into this war for 33 straight years.
Yeah, I don't know why this is just reminding me of this, but so I did a debate at Princeton University against Josh Hammer, who is a senior editor at Newsweek, and it was an Oxford style debate, and I smoked him, but that's neither here nor there. But he, at one point, this was like his big moment in the debate, is he turned over to me in the question and answer segment, and he goes, "Hey Dave, who do you trust more, Osama bin Laden or Benjamin Netanyahu?" And I responded by saying, "I don't trust either of them." And he was like, "Whew, I think that speaks volumes," like it was something so messed up that I was like, I don't trust either of those guys. But it's so funny because it's like, you look at this and you're like, yeah, what, you trust this guy? This guy, he's clearly, I'm sorry, this is not somebody getting it wrong. This is somebody lying through their teeth. He knows that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. He knows about, you think he thought in the 90s that they were gonna develop hundreds of nuclear warheads? It's like so ridiculous. And so the thing is that And of course, Cenk, you know, because you've been in this position, so many times. I've seen you there. Well, they'll go, oh, so what are you saying? You support Hamas, or you support Iran, or you support whoever? And it's like, look, I'm not saying, the thing isn't that like I trust Osama bin Laden more than Netanyahu because I think he's like a good person or something like that. It's just that Osama bin Laden is a fanatic who declared war against the American empire. He has no incentive to lie about that. Like he's telling you, like if you look out your window at night and you see a guy with a bloody knife and he's like, I'm gonna come in there and kill you, you're gonna take him at his word. I think that is what he's trying to do. I'm not gonna go, but Netanyahu is a politician who's trying to lure the US government into war after war after war. So obviously he's incentivized to just lie and lie and lie. And to your point, it's not just that he should be treated as a liar. I mean, he should be treated by the media and the entire US government as a hostile foreign combatant. I mean, he is a representative of a foreign government trying to lie. It's not just that he's lying to people, he's trying to lie the American war machine into another war. This is like a crime against humanity and a crime against our country. It is absolutely just, just like the idea that you could have that track record. Like, look here, even in American domestic politics, there are some fringe, and when I say fringe, I mean like in terms of like who's most, the most consequential figures. There are Lindsey Grahams and some people like this, but like they know that they can't have Dick Cheney selling the next war because we're like, no, you got to go away forever. But yet Benjamin Netanyahu, who is Dick Cheney of Israel, can still come and get rounds of applause in Congress and get a warm reception in corporate media. Yes, Cenk, I mean, that's a long way to answer your question to say, yes, anybody who's giving this guy a warm welcome at this point and not treating him like an enemy of our nation that he is, those people are disqualified from you ever giving them an ounce of trust or credibility again.
Yeah, I would say that Netanyahu's lies against us is a crime against America, right? Yeah. And so, and he's committed that crime now for 33 years straight, trying to hoodwink us into the Iraq war. He was one of the top neocons. Now trying to hoodwink us into the Iran war, and it's despicable no matter which country does it. Okay, and then just like in Iraq, as I was saying, they start with WMD and then they go, just kidding, regime change. Yep. And exactly what they did here. Within just a couple of days after the war starts, they're like, oh, forget the nuclear facilities and the WMD. We're just kidding. Now, no, it's regime change. We have to kill the Ayatollah. We have to get rid of their government. But wait, you can kill the Ayatollah, but to your point earlier, Dave, they can just replace him with another mullah. And if they do that, then they're gonna say, we're gonna kill the next mullah, and then we gotta kill the next mullah. Oh, you know what, this isn't working, we gotta get on the ground. We're gonna send in ground troops, right?
Well, of course, and right. And look, like what's crazy is that you do see a lot of the same people who were selling the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria and Somalia and Yemen and all of this. You see them still trying to sell this one. And even look, they'll tell you these things. They're trying to make it sound very nice. Look, the people hate the government. The people are celebrating. By the way, they could find videos in Iraq and in Libya where people were celebrating. Yeah, a lot of people do hate that government. That's not a guarantee of what's gonna happen once that government falls. That doesn't mean some type of liberalism is gonna flourish or something like that. And so it's easy for them to say, look, the fact of the matter is that the Iranian regime, the mullahs, have been in power since 1979. And for most of that time, they've had the most powerful governments in the world hell-bent on overthrowing them and have still survived. So the idea that this is just gonna be easy to get rid of them or that the people hate them so much that they will overthrow them, I think there's some reason to be skeptical about some of those claims. And it's easy for these guys to celebrate at first. They always do that, and like these things, they always celebrate at first, and it always leads to absolute disaster.
Yeah, and so look, to your point, there's a lot of people in Turkey that are very dissatisfied with the current Turkish government. If we start bombing Turkey, they'll fight us for 500 years straight.
Well, that's right. That's right. And I should just say to your point, I'm sorry to cut you up, but to your point about the moving justifications for this war, I mean, it's just unbelievable. You're right to cite the parallel between that and like the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan and all this stuff. Like they always move the goalposts in all these wars. We're going into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, but then it was to liberate the people, and then we're going into Afghanistan to take out Al Qaeda, but then it was to overthrow the Taliban, and then it was to nation build, and then it's always but this one it's so quick. They're already, I was arguing with Dinesh D'Souza on Twitter today, and he's like, look, I supported the war in Iraq and I was wrong to support that. And I was like, yeah, but you're doing the exact same thing right now. And then he goes, well, this isn't the same as Iraq. I mean, they said Saddam Hussein was in on 9/11, but Iran was in on October 7th. And I was like, dude, first of all, no, they weren't. There's no evidence, but this is exactly the same. Second of all, that's not even the justification yet, dude. You're jumping to the next justification already. I thought it was that they had nuclear weapons or were developing nuclear weapons. I've already seen several people arguing that it's about, freeing the women. Oh, they don't give their women rights. And so that's what it's about. They'll just switch. Once one justification falls apart, they have to have the next one to move to. And just, for any of these, like, first of all, it is nobody has presented any evidence. And in fact, there's been evidence to the counter. The US intelligence said that the Iranians were surprised by October 7th. Now, you could argue that they have sold weapons to Hamas at one point in the past. Or in fact, I think they have. I don't exactly know how much weapons they've sold Hamas. They've certainly sold weapons to Hezbollah and to the Houthis. But regardless, oh, so is that the standard now, Cenk? That if you sell weapons to someone and they attack you, you're guilty of the attack? Because by the way, if that's the standard, you don't want to go through what the US and Israel are guilty of. You know what I mean? We've sold weapons to half the goddamn country, the world, excuse me. And so that justification completely falls apart. But I will say, especially just because I'm on the Young Turks, I guess, that I think it is when they say the stuff about like the feminist stuff, I think that is to try to get the liberals and leftists on like, hey, come on, look at how oppressive this regime is to their women. I mean, you believe in women's rights and all this stuff. And look, there's no question that the regime in Iran is repressive to women. Okay, there's no question that Saddam Hussein was repressive to his people and Muammar Gaddafi was repressive to his people. But the worst thing that ever happened to the people, including the women of Iraq, was George W. Bush launching a war there. And the worst thing that ever happened to the people, including the women in Libya, was Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton launching a war there. And so, it's like you could sit here and tell me the story about how this government's unfair to its people and that we're gonna go in there and overthrow them on behalf of them. But every time you do it, it ends up being the biggest nightmare for those very people that you're pretending to care about.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
reject all of that stuff.
Yeah, Israel and neocons here in America as well are all saying, you're right, we're going to liberate the women there. Oh, really? Because Israel liberated 20,000 women in Gaza of their lives.
Right.
Or they care so much about women except all the women they murdered in Gaza. So now you'll excuse me if I don't buy that load of BS. Okay, so now back to the solution. One more thing here at least. Well, actually two things. So look, the way that I see this, Dave, is it's the powerful against the rest of us, right? There's a poll out today, only 16% of Americans think the US should be involved in this war with Iran, 16%. So that is a radical position, right? You're in a tiny, tiny minority if you think we should go to war in Iran. Okay, now you have tons of independent media, if not most of independent media, online media, podcasts, et cetera, saying don't go, this is crazy, right? Including a lot of the right-wing media. So, but mainstream media, cheerleading. Got the pom-poms out, We got the outfits back, and they're doing calisthenics, getting ready for the war. W-A-W-W. Okay, A-R, you get it. Lindsey Graham is back out there going, oh, war, we need more war, right? And all the politicians, what I think 87% of Congress at least takes money from AIPAC. So they're all like, war. So they're in the radical 16%. And I think most of that 16%, honestly, are people who got brainwashed watching cable news, because cable news loves war, right? So we all are kind of despondent because we think there's no way the 84% can beat the 16%, because the 16% have all the power. But to your point earlier, Dave, I think it's a different day in America. I think that mainstream media has lost a lot of power. I think the reason that the number is at 16% is because people aren't watching the propaganda on cable news anymore. And so they might find this a harder hill than they thought it was because of independent media. So is there hope here that independent media can start a prairie fire of hope that we can actually defeat the powerful, and that if enough of us band together, left, right, and center, and we say, hey, look, maybe you win your elections, but millions of us are going to vote against you. So I just don't be surprised when we do. I don't want Jake Tapper writing a book later saying no one could have seen it coming, because we are going to come for you. And so, if you and I do a tour and we go do it and we start to bring in right-wing allies if they exist, left-wing allies if they exist, I know left-wing allies exist. Whether they'll join in with the right-wing is a different question, right? But can we muster up enough momentum here for the 84% to win rather than the 16%?
Well, okay, so let me just say two things to that. Okay, number one, because I've watched you kind of, I think you've probably become the most prominent figure in the country who's really been kind of launching, even before your very specific kind of targeted plan today, but you've been really promoting the idea that we ought a coalition on this opposition to war, and that it's too crazy for us to say that, like, oh, he's an evil right winger or he's an evil left winger, and like this is just, and I just completely agree with you on that. And I'm a child of the Ron Paul revolution, as we like to call it back then. And that was always his stance, like coalition with anybody who you agree on an issue. Now, look, I will admit that probably in general, when it comes to coalitioning, there's like, everything's within reason, okay? And like, I probably would not coalition with Lindsey Graham about like lowering top marginal income tax rates, even though we might agree on that issue. Like, I'm not gonna coalition with Lindsey Graham because my agreements with him are so much more important. My disagreements with him are so much more important than this tiny agreement with him that I just wouldn't do that. And he's so monstrous for the things that I don't like about him. But this is an issue, and I will say that I think particularly on the left, you do have this issue. And part of this is, again, I'm not saying that there's not this issue on the right at all, or that everyone on the left has it. I just think it's more of an issue on the left. And part of this is because culturally speaking, the right has gotten beat up for many, many years. The right is more happy to just have anybody on their side about any issue. The left has had this major problem, and I think it's something that you've talked about it. You and Anna, I've heard you kind of like discuss this in the past, that over kind of like the last 15 years, the left was almost lured into this kind of like cultural space where there was an inability to like prioritize certain issues above other issues, or ever have like a hierarchy of outrages, or say that like, look, this thing, while it's a little bit wrong, it's really not that important. It's just not nearly as important as this. And I watched this for years. It really saddened me as somebody who's from the left. And when I say from the left, I mean like in my soul. Like, I'm from New York City. I'm a Jewish kid of a single mom. I'm just like, I'm not like by my nature, I'm not like from a conservative background. Like these people are my people. And I watched this happen. It was very saddening to me. But you would see where like during Black Lives Matter protests, there'd be talk about like some cop who had killed an innocent person and wasn't held accountable. And then there would be an equal amount of weight given to like Aunt Jemima being removed from something. And you're like, guys, come on, priorities. And you watched as like Obama would drop like a drone bomb on a wedding in Yemen. And then people on the left would be talking about microaggressions and safe spaces. And you're like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, this is just not nearly as important. But even if you think this is a thing, it's not as important of a thing. And so anyway, I guess I'm just going a long way to say that what you're always weighing, whether you're willing to coalition with somebody, is like, how important is the thing that you're coalitioning about? How important is it? Are we talking about a goddamn genocide? Well, then yeah, you coalition with anybody who's willing to coalition with you for that. Because who are you? Who are you to ever turn anyone away who's gonna support you ending a genocide? I mean, if we were living in 1840 and we were a couple of abolitionists, me and you, Cenk, would we say, well, I don't know, I mean, me and you disagree on taxes. Me and you disagree on monetary policy, so we can't coalition together against slavery. Or would we say, dude, at this point, there's no other issue. There is no other issue. We're abolitionists, we're against slavery. That's it. It doesn't even matter what else we disagree with. This is the issue of our time. And what are we talking about here, man? I mean, we're talking about, like, add them all up. Add up the terror wars and add in Israel's destruction of Gaza to it too. What are we talking about? We have millions of people who have been slaughtered and trillions of dollars that have been wasted. It's the most important issue of our time by far. There's not even a close second. And so, this is anybody who's like hesitant to coalition over this right now while we're at the precipice of another war. I mean, come on, that just like that cannot be the case. Yeah. And so it's just like, we gotta wake up. We gotta learn that there are other issues we're gonna disagree about. There's gonna be lots of really important issues we disagree about. We don't have to not do that. We don't have to pretend we're not disagreeing about them. But this is so important that you have to coalition on this. Yeah. Anyway, that was part one. I had a part two, but I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Lost in that rant and forgot
come back to it for a second. So look, to your points. Number one, remember this is layered, right? So if they vote yes for the war, we're all voting them out no matter what, right? Because it's not like the other Democrat in the primary or the other Republican in the primary isn't gonna have most of the issues you agree with anyway, right? And second of all, if they vote no on the war, then we can go back to fighting about tax cuts and microaggressions and all of that, right? So it doesn't mean they get a free pass, they get to stay in Congress forever. No, it's just table stakes, right? But if you vote against America, and you say, no, I want the elites to win. I want the neocons to win. I want Israel first to win. I want all these guys to win, and we're gonna drive you into this war. No, you're gone. It's table stakes, okay? We're not interested, we're not having that conversation. And so, now to your point about this being the most important issue. Look, I remember growing up thinking, I wonder what I would have done during the Holocaust. Would I have had enough courage to fight back? Because at the time, that required a tremendous amount of courage. We look back at it and go, oh, well, of course we would all fought back, right? But they didn't. The overwhelming majority of the Germans did not fight back. And I always wondered if we would have had the courage to fight back, right? And so, you made the analogy about slavery, I'll make the analogy about this. So if at the time you were debating microaggressions instead of trying to stop the Holocaust, you made the wrong moral calculation, right? And so here we have a genocide, and we now have a new war, and we know how many hundreds of thousands of people died in Iraq. We know how many soldiers we lost. We know how much we lost. If you can't unite on this, you're basically saying we're not the United States of America, and we're gonna fight each other till the cows come home. And by the way, Dave, isn't this how the elites win? They get you to look left, to look right, to see where your problems are. Oh, the left's my problems, the right's my problems. No, brother, look up, right? That's where your problems are, with the powerful.
That's exactly right, Cenk. Come on, I mean, exactly. And look, if you turn on any of the corporate cable news media, or you read the New York Times, or or the Washington Post, or any of this stuff, right? It's always, they're like obsessed with the fight about transgenderism or racism. Like, I'm saying, from whichever side they're coming at it from, whether it's the Fox News side or the MSNBC side. How many times are they just like running a story about, like, I don't know, hey, there's the CIA, and they did all of these really terrible things, and they're like a secret paramilitary organization that has an unbelievable amount of influence on the Congress and the presidency, our foreign policy. When have you ever seen a story about that on any of? They never want to. When do they ever just talk about, like, hey, the Federal Reserve just had a meeting? There's a group of just like a handful of bankers who dictate the entire global economy. Isn't that crazy? It never even comes up. You could watch CNN all day, every day, and never even know there is a Federal Reserve. Like, it just never comes up. It's like a topic that's not even discussed. And so, like, the question isn't like whether you think the Fed should be tightening or easing. The question is, like, how come it never comes up? Why do they love these cultural issues that pit all of us against each other? And then it creates this kind of like funhouse mirror version of society where, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess we're all in our own bubbles, but like, I'll see people, like on arguing about like whether gender is a social construct and there's no such thing. And then you'll have other people being like trad cons who are like, women's place is in the kitchen and only the men should work and only this. And you're like, I've never met a person who has either of these views. I've never met anybody who thought like this represents no one. What are we even talking about here, man? These distractions, neither of these things are happening. We're never gonna live in a world where there's no such thing as a difference between men and women. And we're not going back to 1949 when only men work and women stay home. It's just madness. It's like all these distractions so that nobody focuses on how the most powerful people in this society have totally rigged the game in their behalf so that they can rape the rest of us. And a big part of that is starting these, what the government likes to call wars, where we have, civilian casualties, AKA mass murder campaigns done by states, Yeah. And like, it's the most disgusting thing in the world. We're finally at a point where we could wake up to this. And to your point before, because I do remember my second point of that other thing I was gonna say, when you talk about how much the people are against this and how much they've lost control of the narrative, I will just say that states, governments, no matter what you think of them, whether they're authoritarian dictatorships or democracies, if democracies ever really exist, or democratic socialist countries or whatever, they all rely on propaganda. They all use propaganda. And why is that? Why do they launch propaganda campaigns? It's because at least they believe, I would argue they know, that they need to convince us of their legitimacy. Like they can't do this without that. If you think about all of the major government policies, they always needed propaganda campaigns to get them through. Either side of any war, even the just side of a war, they need propaganda to convince their people to do that. And they have lost the ability, that like they've lost the propaganda mechanism. And so I don't know exactly what that means, but we're in a brave new world now, brother. Like, we are not in the same place that we used to be. You cannot imagine them trying in 2002 when they were building up the war propaganda for Iraq. Just imagine, we had Bill O'Reilly was the #1 show at that time. Imagine now, and I know a lot of people like they'll beat up these guys for not being perfect, but the truth is, like, Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and like all the people out there, they're just way less controlled than Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and Chris Matthews were. And so we at least have like a fighting shot now. These guys will at least host voices that will break down, like the opposing point of view. So yeah, we got a fighting shot like we've never had before. And then at the same time, It's almost something out of like a Greek tragedy or a biblical story. We got a fighting shot like we've never had before. And also we're in a much more dangerous and much weaker position. Our country is $37 trillion in debt, and we're very divided culturally. And and Iran is a much tougher opponent than the other countries in the war. So, okay. So we're at a point here. And I think this is, let me just say this. I'm sorry if I'm ranting for too long, but I like to make this point because sometimes people will ask me, especially young men ask me this a lot. Like, how do you not get blackpilled? How do you not just be depressed about the future? Like if I just laid out this case where we have this amazing opportunity, but also the odds are stacked against us and the situation's more dire than ever before. Like, what do you do in that situation? And the analogy that I like to use is like, look, I got a wife and I got 2 little kids. If I look out my door and I see 5 men with AR-15s rushing my house and they're coming in to kill me and my family, and I just have 1 gun in my house, I could sit there and go, oh man, I'm blackpilled. This sucks. There's 5 of them. They got better guns than I got. This is so unfair. I just don't see how I'm possibly going to win this situation. But listen, dude, you don't have the option to feel that way. You got a gun? Okay. Try to get down low, turn the lights off, take out their legs while they're coming in. You know what I mean? Like, I got some gasoline in my shed. Maybe I could build a makeshift bomb real quick and launch it at them. I don't care. You go out fighting. Like, if you've got a shot and your family's on the line, then what are we talking about here? You go for it and you try your best. And so right now, it's like, if we're gonna go out, let's at least go out trying our best to do something. We got better odds than a lot of people before us. Cenk, as I'm sure you know the history of this well, there were anti-war protesters during World War I who simply just got locked up by the Wilson regime. They just got thrown in insane asylums or prisons or whatever. In fact, Eugene Debs, right? There was a presidential candidate who ran for president from prison. Yep. And so we have it so much better than some people in the past had it. We have so much more of a fighting shot. And if they didn't just give up, then we don't have the right to just give up.
Yeah, I think what you were looking for is it's time to man up, okay? And so, look, this is why I hate the culture wars. There's so many reasons to the point that you made. Like, guys, it doesn't matter if somebody says man up. It doesn't mean that women can't do it, right? You can say knuckle up like Richard Ojeda does. You can say cowboy up, and that doesn't mean that you're against Native Americans. Just calm down and just get together, right? And listen to what Dave said. The culture wars, it's not that things in there aren't important. I'm Muslim, so I get it. Some people can get attacked for their religion, etc., and their identity, and it's terrible, right? So we're not minimizing it. But they use it to divide us. They get us to fight one another, and the culture wars is the main weapon they use to get us to fight each other. Why?
Yes.
Because if we're fighting each other, we're not looking up, right? And
let me put it like this, right? Say something like abortion, okay? Abortion's a very important issue, no matter what side of it you're on. If you're on from the pro-choice perspective, people are trying to infringe on women's basic natural rights. And they're controlling their medical decisions, and they're controlling their bodies, and forcing a woman to carry a baby to term. From the pro-choice position, this is a very, very important issue. From the pro-life position, it's a very, very important issue. It's the murder of babies, and you want to stop the murder of babies. Wherever you fall on that, I'm not denying it's a very important issue. The point is that no one in power is threatened by that issue. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So they don't mind you fighting about that. Yeah.
Exactly.
You go fight about that. You go fight about trans bathrooms and what you should say about transgender people's preferred pronouns and all this. I'm not even saying, none of us are saying you shouldn't have a side in that issue. No one's saying that it's not a very important issue. But like the point is like peep game here, as they used to say in the 90s. Like, see what's really going on. Why are all the most powerful billionaires and giant corporate interests pushing these culture war issues. Maybe it's so we don't pay attention to what they're doing, which is destroying our country,
Yes.
Like, so that's the point of it. It's not that we shouldn't fight about these things or that they're not important. It's just that we should at least notice that they think we're so stupid that we'll be distracted by this and not notice what they're doing to us.
Yeah, and it's okay to be honest about your side. Chapter 5 of my book, Justice is Coming, is about the Matrix. That's the mainstream media and how Chris Matthews lied us into the Iraq war. And by the way, I mean, you read some of his comments describing George Bush as a cowboy and someone else, as a soldier, and he just plays dress up. And oh my God, the powerful are so amazing. That's why we have to go into Iraq, etc. Yep. And he was supposed to be a Democrat. Obama did violate due process. He killed people. He killed American citizens without due process. When you open that door, then very bad things come out of that door. It's important that you hold your own side accountable because you don't know what the other side is gonna do with it. And besides which, at the end of the day, you should care more about being an American than you should about either side that you're on, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's parties, it's ethnicities, whatever it might be. So Dave, to conclude here, at least look, a lot of people will say, oh, no way, Cenk doesn't represent the left, somebody else does, or the other guy does, etc., right? But for whoever agrees with me on the left, that we should get together to fight against this war, because this war is that important. I will say on behalf of those people on the left, I am happy to make an alliance with you. And I think that in terms of libertarians, I don't know anyone that represents them better than you do. So do we have an alliance here between progressives and libertarians to fight the war together?
Yeah, like 100% to fight the war is a interesting phrase to use in this particular context, but I get what you're saying. And yes, 100%. And I think I also think it's good for people to understand that a lot of these distinctions are somewhat they're somewhat of an illusion and they're somewhat arbitrary. I'm not saying there's anything. There are differences between left-wing people and right-wing people. The truth is that I think almost all of us have like a left-winger and a right-winger within us, This is just true in general in life. Like there are areas that you're a little bit more conservative. There's areas where you're a little bit more liberal. There's, and like that's true in general. These terms in a way like the left meaning like more egalitarian, right meaning more hierarchical. We're all a little bit of both of those things in some ways in our lives. But the point is that, look, man, there's really brilliant, interesting left-wing thinkers. There's really brilliant, interesting right-wing thinkers. I'd encourage people to read more of the opposite. You know what I mean? Like if you're a left-winger, read some really smart right-wingers and vice versa. But yeah, this is an issue that's so important. And it's really not like, a lot of these things don't even come down to a left-right divide. It's not really about that. I mean, I don't know. When you're opposing genocide and wars of choice, are you really talking about like a left-right split? I think this is just kind of like a human being thing, and we should all be against this. I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about we just facilitated our greatest ally. Maybe they facilitated us. I don't exactly know what the relationship is these days, but we just, at best case, we facilitated our greatest ally to launch an aggressive sneak attack on a country that poses no threat to us whatsoever. And we're gonna go into a war of choice with them? Come on, we can all be against that.
Yeah, and by the way, let's lead by example. We want the world to get the peace. We want the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Iranians to get the peace. So let's make peace with one another. And so that peace can lead to the greater peace, where we push the powerful into accepting things on our terms for once. And do we all agree? Look at the poll, only 16% want this war. Of course we agree. So unitedagainstwar.com, let's all take action. Dave and I are gonna go and talk to as many different shows and folks as we can and take this message of unity against the war to those folks. Check out his show, it's called Part of the Problem. But here, of course, he's part of the solution. So Dave Smith, thank you so much for joining us, brother. And thank you for being part of this bold alliance, and we don't know where it's going to go, but let's at least give it a shot.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Cenk. Let's do it again real soon.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.